Good afternoon, folks. How are you? As some of you might already know, I'm Bob Gumbs, and this is my talk show, The Concerned Forum. Today, I wanted to talk to all you good people about this upcoming election. And by upcoming election, I mean both the primary and the general, okay? I jotted a few notes down last night because I'm very disturbed, as I think most of us who have half a brain should be disturbed at what we have seen so far, and which really might pretend to be the future of our so-called republic. Now, a lot of us here are trying to figure out who we're going to support and why. Well, I want to start off by saying that there are certain forces in the body politic now that are trying to cause trouble between the black community, the black American community, and one of the candidates in particular. And that also happens to be the candidate that I support. And I mentioned that none other than Senator Bernie Sanders. Now, I had the idea originally of really decorating my little hooch here. Bernie posters, buttons, that sort of thing. But I think that, I felt that it would be better if I just took the opportunity to just present to you why this black American is supporting Senator Sanders. And I'll put my cell right down here. Now, for those of you that think that it's a little bit club-footed or heavy-handed for me to come out and speak about the racial aspect of the candidates and why, for example, I say that I, as a black American, am supporting Bernie, well, as you've been noticing over the last several years, the Republican Party has not hesitated to not only play the race card. My God, these are the people that actually invented it, if you know the history of the modern Republican Party. And when you look at their primary candidate, and I say primary in terms of the most prominent, Mr. Donald Trump, he opened up his campaign essentially making a slur upon all people from Latin America, which is one of the most reprehensible things I have heard in my life since I've been following politics since I was 5 years old. So let me say that I do feel that there are certain forces, as I said, who are trying to keep a wedge between progressives and the black community, which of course would mean between the black community and Senator Sanders. That's nonsense. I think that Senator Bernie has an eminent record in terms of the issues that face black Americans. Not just today, not just this month, not just for this particular campaign. This has been a lifetime odyssey for Senator Bernie Sanders. I can remember, as a very young child, seeing Senator Sanders marching with Dr. Martin Luther King. He was out there. And back in those days, when you marched with Martin Luther King, you were taking your life in your hands. Unfortunately, because of the policies over the last 25 years, it looks like we are going back to that time when to stand up and speak out for the rights of people of color is again becoming an example of one taking one's life in one's hand, which is why I'm solidly behind Senator Sanders. I say this as an American. I say this as an American of African descent. I say this as a partially disabled veteran. I say this as a former member, well, former nothing. Once a member of the Navy Marine Corps team, always such. And I say this as a patriot. I think that it is important, desperately important, for working people in this country and for those people of wealth and goodwill to support Bernie Sanders, because we need someone that can heal this nation, minus a lot of baggage. Now, the senator has a program, and that's the funny thing about Bernie. I like calling him Bernie because he's a man I feel comfortable with. He's a politician I feel comfortable with. He's an American I feel comfortable with. And his program, you could say he's a Johnny One Note, which just shows me that the man is consistent. I think a little consistency is not a bad thing. Now, his program to rebuild our infrastructure and to protect working Americans, or let's say it, the working class. It's the same thing he's been saying for the last 25 years. That's how I know that he means it. Now, excuse me, I think that the biggest thing that we have to fear right now in terms of the body politic is the Republican Party, that GOP. I think this modern Republican Party of today is the, how would you say, the Achilles heel of our country. What they have managed to do, they have managed to take the progress that we were making in this country and turn it backwards. And if you look at all of the meaningful indicators of what makes a modern society modern, we have slipped precariously behind as a nation in terms of health care, in terms of education, in terms of not just education, but general literacy. The ability to understand what is going on in the individual's world. We are far behind our peers in other Western nations. And that is a disgrace. And these are the type of things that Bernie has been speaking about. He's speaking about now. And he needs our support, okay? He needs our support as Americans, as humane, thoughtful Americans. See, this is the thing that has oh my goodness, it has polluted our politics to such an extent. It's not just the simple red meat whistleblowing that the GOP has been doing for the last several elections. It's this know-nothingism. The fact that the elite, the hierarchy of the Republican Party, like they seem to be so upset because, Donald Trump is spoiling their fun. Well, guess what? They created Donald Trump. They're the Frankenstein. Trump is their monster. They were the ones that began this business of dog whistle politics. Where were they? Where were the RNC when Trump was running around the country accusing the first black president of being born in Kenya, of not having the intellectual wherewithal to go to Columbia University, to go to the great law school that he went to be able to teach law? Where was the GOP then? Saying, listen, we don't like this guy's policies, but we're not in the business of tearing him down as a human being. I heard nothing from the leading Republicans. Nada, nothing, not a damn thing. Donald Trump makes one of the most racist speeches that anybody has made since the 60s about Latin Americans, in particular against Mexicans. What do we hear from the other Republican contenders? Even from Jeb Bush, who claims himself to be a friend of Spanish-speaking people, which I mean, I'm sure he is to a certain extent. But where was he? Where was the body slam that any of these guys and gals, Fiorina, the kid from Florida, whose name escapes, Mario Rubio. Where was Mr. Rubio? Senator Cruz from Texas. Not only did you not get a peep out of Mr. Cruz in terms of condemning Trump's blatantly racist remarks, Cruz said, hey, you slam him on one level, I'll do you 3 better. This from a man named Cruz. They said nothing. The party as a whole said nothing. It has taken, I don't know what you want to call it, dynamite practically, for the RNC to, basically try to tell Donald Trump to cool some of his more racist diatribe. And this is the kind of person that we want to see occupying the Oval Office? Is this the kind of leadership that I fought for, that I took scars for in the service of my country? To see my country turned over to the hands of a racist, arrogant, bigoted, multi-billionaire who cares absolutely nothing for the average person, only insofar as how he can use them to get their vote. I think that we're better than that in America. I truly do. I think that this election is going to wind up saying so much about who we are as a nation. I dare say perhaps as much, if not more, than the election of '08. Because I'm going to tell you something. The people in the upper classes, those that control great wealth, they're always so quick when you point out the social problems in this country. They're quick to scream, oh, you're trying to wage a class war. Well, guess what? That war has already started. It's been going on for quite some time. And guess what, working class? All the key battles we have been losing. So you expect a billionaire, a racist billionaire, to save you or to save us? No, I don't think so. Now, let me point out something else. When we're talking about Senator Sanders, we're talking about a guy that has crafted an economic policy that doesn't work on the simple idea of, oh, well, we're just going to take money from the wealthy people, okay, and basically that will make everything okay for the middle class. No, 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 no. We're talking about a series of targeted investments, for example, in infrastructure that will bring our economy back. We're talking about trade policy that is realistic and that works for the benefit of the masses of the American people. These crazy policies, which unfortunately have been delved into on both sides of the aisle, both Republicans and, I am sorry and ashamed to say, Democratic side, these policies that take jobs away from the United States. In the last 15 years, America has lost 60,000 factories overseas, to places overseas. We're supposed to be a superpower, the most premier superpower in the history of the planet. I want someone to explain to me, how can we be the primary superpower, be a nation with bedrock social stability, when we have become a nation that we don't build anything. We don't create anything anymore. My God, we don't even dream. You know, it's weird because you have so many people, unfortunately, again, on both the Democratic and Republican side, that when they talk about the 60s, some people talk about it as if to denigrate it. Those of us who have the wisdom to understand what's been going on with our country understand that the 60s were really our last great days. Unfortunately, too few of us realized it at the time. Why do I say that? Because in the 60s, we still dared to dream. We won the space race. We had the best economy in the world. We were a great nation. We waged war on poverty. We didn't wage war on poor people. We didn't walk around talking about, oh, well, the era of big government is over. We didn't think that the solution to a crime problem was to lock up all the men in the community. Now, I understand that within the Democratic Party, the Clintons have apologized for some of the missteps that happened in the 90s. The war on public assistance, the whole thing about building jails as opposed to building colleges and high schools and elementary schools. Nonetheless, that is what happened. And nonetheless, the communities of color, and now we're seeing working class white communities, we have paid the price for those missteps. It is time for us to walk, I was getting ready to say, on a different path. But actually, this path is not so different. One of the problems that I have with Miss Clinton, and let's make no mistake about it, Hillary Clinton is a great lady, and she is a strong lady, and she has my respect. We who support Senator Bernie, we understand that one of the big problems that our Republican friends have given us is this idea that because I disagree with you, ergo I am your enemy. Ergo, you are a beast that must be destroyed. No, 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 no. I support Bernie Sanders because I believe his policies to be better than Senator Clinton's. Excuse me, than Secretary Clinton's. But that does not negate the respect that I have for her. One of the most mendacious, stupid, silly things that's taking place right now, and I'll say this on behalf of Ms. Clinton, is this whole nonsense about the top secret documents. Now, if it wasn't so serious, it would be amusing. It would be funny as hell. Now, are we saying that somehow Hillary is in league with Al-Qaeda? I doubt it. Are we saying that Hillary is in league with ISIS? Ridiculous. So we have taken those off the table automatically. Has she been selling secrets to the Russians? Well, the Russians, Putin supposedly doesn't like Hillary Clinton. So we know that Hillary, at the bottom of this, there is nothing there. What we're talking about is a situation where the Republican Party, with their typical maniacal need for bloodlust, what they are trying to do, they are trying to take a paper, well, in the Navy we have a word for it, but basically they're trying to take a paper issue, a paper problem, and turn it into one of national security. Now, unfortunately for them, I have quite a great deal of experience with national security. I spent 5 years out of the 11 I was in the Navy, assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, with a top secret TS SBI cosmic clearance. Cosmic just means that you're cleared for anything the president sees. That's all it means. And I know a great deal about security. And I can look and I can see exactly what's going on. They're trying to make an issue out of nothing. As a matter of fact, it's a political Seinfeld show. You know, the whole base of the Seinfeld is that you're making a show out of nothing. Well, that's what this whole business with Hillary is all about. They're trying to make something out of nothing. And I think it's disgraceful. And as I said before, and I say again, I am solidly behind Senator Bernie Sanders. And what I want to see, I want to see this nonsense put in the garbage can where it belongs, so that Senator Bernie, Secretary Hillary, and the other Democratic contenders, and then eventually the Republican contender, can fight in a nonpartisan way, but basically slam each other about the issues. I want to know, what are we going to do about the Middle East after their party led us into this terrible waste of blood that has been Iraq and Afghanistan for the last decade? What are we going to do about that? What are we going to do to get this treaty with Iran, or this agreement with Iran, to get this safely through and passed? What are we going to do about the incredible, horrendous, vast difference between the economy of the working class and the economy of the wealthy? What are we going to do to correct the economic imbalance that we have in this country? What are we going to do to take care of and help the survivors, the veterans of this terrible, phony war on drugs? These are the issues that we need to be discussing in this country. What are we going to do to rebuild our tattered infrastructure? These are the things that Bernie talks about. And these are the things that I want to see him and Hillary as our two top contenders in the Democratic Party. This is what I want to see them discuss. And I want to see which one of them, although I already in my heart, I know that that would be Senator Sanders, but who could best stand up to the new racism, what's a good way to say this, the nouveau racism of Donald Trump. Because make no mistake, what Donald Trump is doing, he is appealing to the worst instincts of America. We have to understand, we have to grow up, and we have to mature as a country, and we have to understand that in spite of how great we have managed to become as a nation, we have to understand the fact that there were many wrongs done to many people here. We, for example, we a nation of immigrants, but we have to remember how this place came to be the United States of America. We claim to be a nation based on Judeo-Christian values of law, of charity, of humanity, of basic common decency. For a person who wishes to sit in the chair of the Oval Office and to condemn a race of people, an entire group of people, to blot an entire ethnic group of people, calling them thieves, rapists, murderers. That is so wrong. That is so evil. And we have to learn to stand up as Americans and say, no, enough is enough. Now, some people, or there is some comment on the part of some of the media about the issue of Black Lives Matter, and how they had seemed like they had it in for, Bernie's campaign. Well, let me tell you something. I happen to be a member of Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, they had a general meeting. This was about, about 8 months ago, at a place called the Ethical Study Center, over around 64th Street and Central Park West. And at that time, I signed my name and I became a member of Black Lives Matter. The reason I think that that is an appropriate name for the organization, and some have said, well, all human life matters. Well, yeah, that's correct. It's supposed to. Unfortunately, all one has to do is to look at the history of this country, and one can easily see that in far too many cases, black lives, the lives of people of color, black, brown, yellow, and red, far too often have not carried the same worth as the lives of the, quote, majority population. Hence the name. I would caution my fellow members of Black Lives Matter, I would say to them, which I've already communicated through email, and I will do so verbally at the next meeting that I attend, that I feel that the way that we are conducting ourselves, the confrontation, yeah, that's necessary. No one should be left off the hook. However, we do have to keep in mind those who would be our friends as opposed to those who have already declared themselves to be our enemies. And I say from the bottom of my heart, Bernie Sanders is definitely not an enemy of Black Lives Matter. Should he be challenged? Anyone who wishes to hold public office in the United States of America should be challenged. But it has to be done in such a way that is both respectful and demanding, but also aware of, in terms of, we're having a discussion with a friend, and no, we're not fighting with an adversary. That's the only point that I would make. But again, this is where, no disrespect intended, I think that Secretary Clinton would have a hard problem because of the fact that, as it was mentioned when she was in her discussion with some members of Black Lives Matter, and it was mentioned about the fact that her and her husband, and in their time, they were the main ones on the Democratic side, unfortunately, that supported many of the measures that have created the problems that we're trying to deal with in this present time period. I think that Bernie Sanders has a clean record, or a clear record, on that score. He doesn't have that he doesn't carry any of that baggage. And I think that that is important. And I think that as a member of the African American community, that's something that I keep in mind. Also, as a veteran, and as a disabled veteran, I also bear in mind the whole tragedy of 9/11 and how we wound up in Afghanistan and Iraq in the first place. Many people feel that it was as a result of Barack and his team, the president now, at that time Senator Barack Obama, and his team, and their sheer brilliance that got us the first black president in the White House. I would say not to denigrate, not to take away anything from, at that time, the senator and his team, but I think, as I'm sure the Secretary Clinton realizes, that what really cost her that election was a slight, perhaps, rebellion amongst the base, because I honestly believe that if not for the fact that Secretary Clinton had supported Bush Jr. in that horrible, filthy war, and then continued to stand by her decision, I think that she would have won the presidency in '08. I honestly believe that. And as many people who I would call base Democrats believe, that they hold the Clintons responsible to a certain extent for, in so many words, bringing Wall Street into the Democratic Party. In other words, we lost our FDR. We lost our New Deal coloring, and we basically adopted the Dow Jones, however you want to put it. We basically brought Wall Street into the Democratic Party. And I know of a lot of Democrats, base Democrats, not of the elite, but just your run-of-the-mill Jane and Joe lunchbox Democrats. That's exactly the way they feel. Because too many of their policies have benefited the people on the top. Again, people have different ideas, different opinions. All we can do is let them have their roll of the dice and see what transpires. Well, we have seen over these last 15 years or so what has transpired. We have seen what the repudiation of Glass-Steagall, that banking and economic protection that Roosevelt, FDR, put in during the Great Depression, which basically protected our banking system for about 50 or 60 years. And then during the Clinton administration, it was removed. And that's what gave rise to the gambling, the whole roulette wheel, Vegas-style banking that we are now only too familiar with, and which helped to bring about the economic crash that we experienced in '08, '09. I believe that Bernie Sanders, I believe his nostrums, his remedies to that situation are what this country needs. What Bernie says is that instead of the massive transferring of wealth that our nation has been doing to those at the top, what we need is an infusion, an economic infusion to the middle class and to those things which help to create a middle class. You got to remember that the basis of any democracy is the middle class. That's where it's at, as they used to say back in the 60s. But it's true. That's where it's at. You cannot have a functioning democratic republic. It's not going to happen if you don't have a viable middle class. It's not that people who call themselves progressive, it's not that they say, oh, well, to hell with the poor, we'll show our contempt for the wealthy. It's not about that. But what it is that the politics of a nation is enacted by the people who are in the middle. Okay? That's why the middle class is so important. And see, something else that people need to keep in mind. A viable middle class is not a necessary result of a capitalist system. See, people, I think one of the big problems, beside climate change, potential for war in the Middle East, terrible infrastructure here in America, those are huge problems. But I think along with that, and what really gets overlooked, and if you've ever spent a lot of time overseas, especially in Western Europe, and not just going over there, sightseeing, but actually sitting down and taking the opportunity to talk with people, you know, as they say, to talk with the natives. All right? If you do that, then what I'm going to say next, it will ring a bell. Because one of the most terrible things, and I know it sounds like, wow, there goes that damn Bob Gumbs attacking the Republicans. Wow, some poor Republican looking at this and saying, oh, wow, this SOB, he's holding us responsible for everything. If it rains 3 days in a row, it's the fault of the GOP. Well, let me put it to you like this. Unfortunately, with the birth of the modern Republican Party, a lot of it has caused a lot of very bad things. Okay, put it to you like that. And I guess that's what happens, because we got to remember something. And this is right on track with my support for Bernie and why I think that he would be a better presidential candidate and a better president than Secretary Clinton. Just, hear me out. Okay, remember, I'm trying to get something across that I think it's on someone's best day. It's kind of complicated, and I'm trying to, that's a proper word, decomplicate it, okay? But what we have been facing, what we have been looking at for the last few decades, and I don't think that a lot of Democrats have really sat down and thought about it. And there's some reasons for that. It's not because I'm saying that all the Democrats on the top echelon of the party are evil people. Okay, that's not the case. But what it is that this Republican Party, and I don't know if I had mentioned it earlier, but I grew up in a Republican family. My dad was the district leader in Harlem, okay, in the western part of Harlem, for the Republican Party. And as a kid, a very young kid, I remember what the Republican Party consisted of, okay? And I have seen what it has become. And we have to bear in mind that this Republican Party was created out of a cauldron of hate, okay? This Republican Party, after the triumph of first Kennedy and then Lyndon Johnson in '64, you had Richard Nixon, and you had his wizard-in-chief, Pat Buchanan, and these guys were desperate because in my opinion, those who are old enough to remember, maybe they might feel differently, but from what I can remember, and then looking back on it, after the defeat of the Republican Party in '60, then, God help us, the assassination of Jack Kennedy in '63, and then the tsunami of victory of the Democrats again in '64, and the passing of the civil rights bills, '64, '65, with the help of what was then the top echelon of the Republican Party, people like Bob Dole, Everett Dirksen, etc., Jake Javits here in New York. The Republican Party was, to a large extent, on the way out. Nixon, egged on by his chief counselor, I call him Wizard-in-Chief, Pat Buchanan, and a few other people, Ken Phillips, I believe, they came up with the idea of the Southern Strategy, which, in a nutshell, is that you take all the white men who were used to voting Democratic in the South and who were angry at the National Party's commitment to integration, to civil rights on the national and international level. And you had Pat Buchanan and Nixon basically saying, come on over and be Republicans. And that decision from the '68 election, there is a train. You can see a steady trail from then to Donald Trump of today. This is a party that is built, talking about the Republican Party of today. This is not the party of Lincoln. This is not the party of the small working man, the small shopkeeper. This is a party that is based on racial anger, okay? And I think that a lot of the Democrats, we need to keep this in mind, okay? And that when we have major elections such as this, we need to keep in mind who will be our best champions to fight this dragon, because dragon it is. Can we expect our champion to be folks that, how should I say, to a certain extent compromised with the dragon? Or, if not compromised, put it this way, who will not challenge the dragon, where the dragon needs to be challenged? I think that's the question that, as Democrats, we have to ask ourselves. Now, we have to be honest, and we have to admit that what's happened in this country is we now have one of the two major parties that has decided as their course of action to take all of the inadequacies of our American society, of our capitalist American society, take those inadequacies, those problems, and essentially scapegoat them. In other words, you hold certain ethnic groups of people responsible. So to the low-income white guy in Alabama, for example, you basically tell him that his lot in life is the fault of lazy black people combined with criminal Latino people who are basically trying to take away his America. And what we have to do as Democrats, we have to field candidates who can look them right in the eye and say, you're full of it. That the problem is that you have, over the last few decades, you have turned a great economy that the 50s and the early 60s have left us, and you turn it into an economy where the rich continually get to be richer, and the masses of the people continually get poorer and poorer. Now, one of the things that Hillary camp, I don't know if they're saying the same thing now, but about a month and a half ago, I can remember some representative of her side was talking about the idea of Bernie talking about free tuition, okay? And, you know, they basically said, well, yeah, Secretary Hillary is, she's great with the needs of people trying to go to university, and she has this program, that kind of tax relief to help, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But when they're approached with, well, Bernie says no, you know, higher education should be free. You know, they kind of put on that indulgent smile, and oh, that would be so nice in heaven, you know, but in the real world. Well, folks, guess what? In this state, here in New York State, university was free. You went to City College, you didn't pay tuition because it was for free. In many states, California, for example, university was free, no cost. Okay? Out in the Midwest, you had many universities. The land-grant colleges. You know who started that, by the way? A guy named Lincoln, happened to be president during the time of something called the Civil War. And he came up with this idea of agricultural colleges, land-grant colleges, so that guys off the farm could be able to go and get an education and take the expertise and the skills that they learned and bring it back to their rural agricultural communities and, you know, build them up. Kind of like the GI Bill. They wouldn't have been a middle class in the 50s if it wasn't for the GI Bill. The space race. You had former Nazis. You had former GIs who started going to college in the GI Bill the minute the war was over. You had American industry working hand in hand with government. That's how we won the bloody space race. So this idea that you can't get things from government, that government you know, can't give you free tuition or low cost, next to nothing tuition. Pardon my French, but that is really BS. And we need candidates from the Democratic Party that can say so and can point to examples of why what the Republicans are saying BS is just pure BS, pure nonsense. On trade, I think that both parties have been bad on trade. I think the Republicans, unfortunately, they have been the lead on that one. And that's what happens when you have a party that's devoted to telling its base, its low-income base, such as the Republicans have, low information, low education base. They tell them one thing, and then they sit down and they have dinner with the millionaire billionaires, and it's a entirely different story. Because we have been involved in a bunch of trade deals, and Trump is right about that. Don't get me wrong. He's a very arrogant, ignorant, bigoted ass. But he's not wrong about certain things when he talks about trade. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth of the matter. That's no reason to vote for this knucklehead, but it's good to take a look at what's on the record of each candidate when it comes to the trade issue. And I do fault even our present Democratic administration this TPP deal. It's terrible. And it will cost working class Americans even more jobs. And that's not good. And Bernie is against that. And that's another reason why I'm for Bernie. You know, we have a lot of work that needs to be done in this country. And we need the people who are going to be in our vanguard leading us to do this work. They have to be people who, as I said at the beginning of this program, they have to have as little baggage as possible. And I asked myself, you know, what's going to happen? You got Donald Trump standing up there, and you have all these other folks, Democrat, Republican, makes no difference. But how are you going to debate and argue with a guy that's giving you money? You know, that's one thing that some of the writers have said about this particular campaign that has made Trump so problematic, because he has supported all these people at one time or another. Unfortunately, for Bernie, that is not the case. We're not going to have that problem. Folks, in my own way, as I fought for America when I was a little younger, when I was in the Navy, I feel that I'm fighting for America now. For an America that's inclusive, for an America where everyone has an opportunity. I'm not fighting for a country that's a walled concentration camp, as Mr. Trump and the other Republicans want. I'm fighting for that city on the hill, and that real city on the hill. And I believe that Senator Bernie Sanders is the best. Thank you.